Welcome to the world of science fiction stories, and don't forget to share and subscribe the channel. I stole an alien queen's crown. Now she wants to punish me personally. Welcome to the world of science fiction. Comment below where in the world you are watching from today, and if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. Lucas Darnell had pulled off plenty of high-risk jobs before, but this one was supposed to be different, simple, clean in and out, the kind of heist that left no loose ends. The job had been laid out by a contact who paid well and didn't ask stupid questions, a private buyer looking for an artifact lost in the Zon Empire's hordes. Lucas didn't care about the specifics, he cared about the payout, the thrill, and the reputation that came with robbing one of the most feared empires in the galaxy. But now, as he found himself shackled in an opulent chamber, staring up at the piercing, red-eyed gaze of the alien queen he had stolen from, he realized something had gone horribly wrong. The Zon royal vault had been nothing like he expected. He had bypassed high-level security systems, dodged the patrol drones, and pried open the containment unit expecting to find a standard relic, a forgotten bauble worth a small fortune. Instead, he had found a crown, not just any crown, but one pulsing with ancient energy, adorned with intricate carvings that hummed against his fingers. The moment he lifted it, he had barely had time to admire his prize before alarms blared, the chamber sealing itself shut, trapping him inside. Within moments, the room flooded with armed guards, their golden armor gleaming under the artificial lights, weapons leveled at his chest. He had fought, of course, he always fought, but the Zons weren't common mercenaries. Their warriors were genetically enhanced, bred for combat, faster and stronger than any human. One moment he was swinging his shock baton, and the next, his world had gone black. Now, consciousness returned with a dull ache in his skull, the weight of heavy shackles pulling at his wrists, forcing him to kneel. He didn't need to be told where he was. The Queen's Citadel was infamous, a towering fortress built into the heart of Zon rule where the matriarchs decided the fate of those foolish enough to cross them. He had heard stories about Queen Enya, a ruler whose cunning was matched only by her ruthlessness, and now, as she stood before him, her presence was even more formidable than the legend suggested. She was tall, her body adorned in dark, elegant armor that hugged her form, giving her the look of a warrior rather than just a monarch. Her horns curved back like obsidian crowns, and those glowing red eyes studied him with a mixture of curiosity and amusement, as though she were deciding whether he was worth her attention at all. The air between them was charged, and when she finally spoke, her voice was rich with command and her tone deceptively smooth. "You are either the boldest thief in the galaxy or the stupidest I have yet to decide." She stepped forward, her presence consuming the space between them. "Do you know what you've stolen, human?" Lucas kept his face neutral, forcing down the tension twisting in his gut. Playing dumb wouldn't work. He had seen the way her warriors stood at attention, the way her advisors watched from the sides of the chamber, clearly anticipating her reaction. The crown wasn't just a symbol of authority, it was something more, something sacred to her people, and that meant he had done more than commit simple theft. He had insulted an entire empire. He didn't exactly have time to read the warning label, he admitted, his voice dry, knowing full well that snark wouldn't help him. Yet, unable to resist, a flicker of something, amusement, perhaps, crossed her features, but it was gone in an instant. She turned slightly, lifting the crown from its resting place beside her throne, holding it between her fingers as if weighing its worth. "This is no mere trinket, no artifact to be sold to the highest bidder," she said, her tone dangerously soft. "It is the symbol of my rule, my lineage, my right to govern, and you thought to take it as if it were a common prize." Lucas knew when to push and when to shut up. Right now, silence was his best move. The tension in the room thickened, the weight of her words settling over him like a storm cloud. Then she did something unexpected, she smiled. It wasn't the cruel, triumphant smirk of a ruler delivering a death sentence, it was something far more unsettling, the look of a predator who had just decided to play with its prey. "A thief with such boldness deserves a fitting punishment," she mused, turning the crown in her hands. Execution would be the obvious choice, but it would be wasteful. Her glowing gaze locked on his unreadable face. Tell me, Lucas Darnell, how does a man with no allegiance, no home, and no fear of consequence see himself dying? Lucas clenched his jaw. He wasn't afraid of death, he had faced it too many times to flinch now, but there was something about the way she said it, as if she already knew his answer, as if she were testing something deeper. He didn't want to give her the satisfaction of a reaction, but his heart pounded harder in his chest. If you're offering me a last request, I'll take a drink and a fast ship out of here, he said, the cocky grin not quite reaching his eyes. The Queen chuckled, the sound low and edged with amusement. How predictable. She stepped closer, and he felt the sharp edge of her nails graze his chin, tilting his head up. No, human, you will not die. Not yet. He hated the way his breath caught at the contact, at the way her presence overwhelmed his senses. He had faced warlords, bounty hunters, even syndicate assassins, but none had made him feel as off balance as she did. You stole from me, she continued, her voice dropping to a purr. So now you belong to me, and if you are to take from a queen, you will learn what it means to serve one. Lucas swallowed hard, but his smirk remained. If only, out of sheer defiance, I could say, Your Majesty, I expected chains in a dungeon, not a job offer. Her eyes gleamed. Oh, you will be chained, and as for your duties. She leaned in slightly, her voice softer now, dangerously close. You will find out soon enough. The guards moved before he could even register the shift. His chains were lifted, and he was hauled to his feet, the weight of what had just happened sinking in. She wasn't going to kill him, she wasn't even going to throw him in the dungeon. She was keeping him, and that, somehow, felt far more dangerous. Lucas wasn't sure what was worse, the fact that he had gone from being a free man to some kind of personal captive, or the fact that Queen Enya seemed to be enjoying every second of it. He had expected torture, interrogation, maybe even an execution if she was feeling particularly ruthless, but instead, she had done something far more unpredictable. She had claimed him not as a prisoner of war, not as a nameless slave to be discarded, but as something more personal, something that made the entire palace whisper. When he was dragged from the throne room under the watchful eyes of her warriors, the Zons weren't just keeping him locked up in a dungeon, they were escorting him through the grand halls of the citadel, each step a reminder that he was somewhere he didn't belong. The palace was a fortress, adorned with towering obsidian columns, walls lined with intricate golden scripts, and great crystalline windows that cast shifting light across the floors. There was power in every inch of the place, the kind of monumental arrogance only an empire like the Zons could afford. And yet, the most unnerving part wasn't the grandeur, nor the wary glares of the guards flanking him, it was the way Enya had looked at him. She had called him bold, had hinted that there was more to his punishment than simple retribution. Lucas had spent enough time around powerful people to recognize when someone was toying with him, and Enya, the queen, warrior, ruler, was playing a very dangerous game. He didn't know the rules yet, but he knew one thing for certain, he would not be an easy piece for her to move. They led him through a series of corridors until they reached an ornate chamber. The guards unlocked the heavy doors and pushed him forward. Lucas stumbled slightly, catching himself before glaring at the nearest warrior, but they merely stood like statues, unreadable behind their dark helmets. The doors shut behind him with a heavy thud, and the realization sank in, he wasn't being held in some dank prison cell. This was a royal chamber. The room was lavish but not excessive, dark walls were illuminated by glowing amber sconces, the ceiling high and domed with intricate patterns etched into the metal, and a massive window stretched across one side, offering a view of the planet's capital below. Tall spires rose into the violet sky, ships drifting between them like shimmering fish in a vast ocean of stars. A sitting area was arranged in one corner, a collection of finely crafted furniture that looked far too expensive for a man like him to be near, and at the center of it all was a bed, large, layered with dark silk and sheets, its presence looming over the rest of the space. Lucas exhaled slowly. So, not a cell, then. A cage, a gilded one. The sound of approaching footsteps made his spine stiffen. He turned just as the doors opened again, and there she was, Queen Enya, standing in the doorway like she owned the universe. And maybe she did. She moved with that effortless confidence, the kind that came from knowing no one could challenge her. Her armor was gone now, replaced by something less ceremonial but still regal, a flowing dark robe lined with gold, the fabric shifting as she walked toward him. Her horns caught the low light, and her glowing red eyes locked onto him, as though he were some kind of entertaining puzzle she was eager to solve. "You're adjusting well," she observed, her voice laced with amusement as she swept her gaze over him. Lucas crossed his arms, leaning slightly against one of the carved support beams near the bed, acting far more casual than he felt. "Yeah, well, I've had worse accommodations," he said, glancing around. "Usually, when people put me in chains, I don't get silk sheets and a view." Her lips curved, though he couldn't tell if she was actually amused or just indulging him. "Your situation is unique. That's one way to put it." He met her stare, refusing to be the first to break the silence. "Mind telling me what exactly my situation is? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've decided I'm more valuable breathing than rotting in one of your dungeons. And considering you don't strike me as the merciful type, I'd really love to know what you're planning." She didn't answer right away. Instead, she studied him, her gaze sharp and assessing, as if she were peeling back layers he hadn't even realized he had. He had dealt with powerful warlords, crime bosses, and corrupt officials, but none of them looked at him like this, like she saw something useful beneath the swagger, something interesting. Finally, she spoke, her voice softer than he expected. "You stole something priceless from me." She stepped closer. Most would have begged for their lives by now, or broken beneath the weight of what they'd done, but you, she tilted her head slightly, her red eyes flickering with something unreadable. "You're not afraid. Not in the way you should be." Lucas felt the air between them shift, something heavy settling over the space. He refused to step back, refusing to give her the satisfaction of seeing any kind of weakness. "I've learned fear doesn't do much for a man in my line of work," he said, "and I know when someone is stalling. So let's cut the games, Your Majesty. What do you want from me?" For the first time, something in her expression changed, not amusement, not calculation, but curiosity. She took another step forward, close enough now that he could see the faint glow of her skin beneath the ambient light, the edges of her horns gleaming with a smooth polish. "What if I told you I don't know yet?" she mused, her voice quiet but firm. Lucas exhaled through his nose, his patience wearing thin. "Then you're keeping me alive just to see if I amuse you. That's a dangerous game to play, Queen." Her smile deepened, and for a terrifying moment, she looked pleased. "Yes," she murmured. "It is." A knock at the door interrupted the charged silence that had settled between them, and Enya turned slightly, her expression returning to that untouchable authority she carried so well. A guard entered, bowing deeply before speaking in clipped Zon. His tone was urgent. Lucas didn't need to understand the language to recognize bad news when he saw it. Enya's expression barely flickered, but something in her posture shifted. Whatever had just been reported, it wasn't minor. She dismissed the guard with a simple nod before turning back to Lucas. "It seems I have business to attend to," she said smoothly. "We will continue this discussion later." Lucas watched her every instinct, screaming that something bigger was at play. He couldn't wait. His mind was already racing as the doors shut behind her, leaving him alone again. He exhaled, staring out the massive window at the alien city stretching into the distance. He had no idea what Enya's endgame was, but one thing was certain, he was deeper in this than he ever intended to be, and if he wanted to survive, he had to figure out exactly what kind of game the Queen was playing before it was too late. Lucas spent the next several hours packing the confines of his so-called prison, trying to piece together what the hell was happening. He had been in bad situations before, but nothing quite like this. Getting caught stealing was an occupational hazard, but getting personally claimed by the queen of a warlike empire, well, that was a new level of bad luck. The room was too comfortable to be a punishment, but it wasn't exactly a privilege either. It was a test, a mind game, and if there was one thing Lucas knew about people in power, it was that they didn't do anything without a reason. He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling as he turned toward the massive window that overlooked the capital. The city stretched below, an intricate maze of towering spires and glowing avenues, the sharp alien architecture reflecting the dim light of the twin moons above. He had always considered himself a man of space, a wanderer who never stayed in one place too long, but right now, his entire universe had shrunk to the size of this gilded cage. Enya hadn't returned after that cryptic exchange, which alone told him something serious was happening, something serious enough to pull her away from whatever game she was playing with him. He had seen the look on that guard's face, the way she had shifted ever so slightly before leaving, even without knowing the Zon language, he could recognize tension when he saw it, and that meant something was wrong. He needed to know more. Lucas strode toward the door, testing the handle, locked, of course. He wasn't naive enough to think they'd leave it open for him to just walk out. But that didn't mean there weren't other ways to get what he wanted. Taking a seat on the edge of the bed, he considered his options. The guards outside wouldn't answer his questions, and even if they did, he doubted they'd tell him anything worth knowing. His best bet was Enya herself, but that required playing the long game, something he hated. He worked in the moment, quick decisions and quicker exits. This whole situation forced him into unfamiliar territory, and he wasn't sure if he could afford to be patient when he had no idea what was coming next. Just as frustration threatened to take over, the door finally opened. Lucas sat up as a tall Zon woman entered. She was in her authority, but she carried the same air of command. Her deep copper skin was marked with ceremonial tattoos, her golden armor polished to perfection, her sharp red eyes sweeping over him with thinly veiled disdain, as if she couldn't believe the queen was wasting time on a mere human. Lucas offered a lazy smirk. "Let me guess, you're here to tell me what an honor it is to be in the queen's custody." The woman didn't so much as blink. "You will be bathed and dressed appropriately." Her tone was clipped, as if even speaking to him was beneath her. "You are expected to dine with the queen tonight." Lucas arched a brow. "Dinner? That's new. I thought I was just here for decoration." She ignored his comment, stepping aside as two more attendants entered, carrying folded garments and what looked like some kind of ornate metallic cuffs. He glanced between them, then back at the woman. "I'm guessing I don't get a choice in this." "No," she said simply. Lucas sighed, having figured as much. They led him through a side door into a separate bathing chamber, one just as unnecessarily luxurious as his room. The attendants worked efficiently, their expressions neutral as they stripped away his old clothes and shoved him into a pool of heated water laced with strange, shimmering minerals. The warmth was a shock at first, but as the tension eased from his muscles, he couldn't help but sigh. He'd been through plenty of rough landings, plenty of bruises and close calls, but this was the most extravagant imprisonment he had ever experienced. When they finally deemed him clean enough, they pulled him from the water and dressed him in dark, fitted garments lined with delicate gold filigree, the fabric lightweight yet strangely durable. The cuffs snapped into place around his wrists, not tight enough to restrict movement, but not exactly loose either, more ceremonial than functional. But Lucas wasn't stupid, they were a symbol, a reminder. The woman led him through the palace halls, her pace swift and unyielding. Lucas kept up, taking in the layout, marking possible escape routes, nodding at every armed guard they passed. The place was a fortress, but fortresses had weaknesses, he just needed time to find them. Finally, they reached a grand dining chamber where Queen Enya waited. She was seated at the head of an elongated obsidian table, a spread of exotic dishes arranged for her, though she seemed in no rush to eat. When her eyes lifted to meet his, there was something unreadable in them, something calculated, something expectant. Lucas was led to a seat at her side, and the woman who had escorted him bowed slightly before retreating, leaving them alone except for the ever-present guards at the perimeter of the room. He leaned back slightly, studying Enya with an easy smirk. "Not that I'm complaining, but I don't usually get invited to fancy dinners by people who put me in chains," he said. Her lips curled in amusement. "Consider this an opportunity." "An opportunity for what?" he wondered, as he picked up a silver goblet filled with a dark, fragrant liquid. He sniffed it before taking a cautious sip. The taste was rich, spiced, stronger than anything he'd had before. Enya took a slow sip of her own drink, setting it down before finally speaking. To prove your worth. Lucas raised a brow. You think I have worth? She tilted her head slightly. You are still alive, aren't you? He let out a dry chuckle. Fair point. She reached for a delicate piece of fruit, her movements calm and controlled, but Lucas wasn't fooled. There was something beneath the surface, something she wasn't saying. He wasn't just here because she found him amusing, there was a reason she hadn't killed him, a reason she was playing this game instead of simply executing him. You have made enemies, Lucas Darnell, she said after a long pause, her voice quieter now, more measured. But you have also made an impression. He leaned forward slightly. And what exactly do you plan to do with that impression? She met his gaze unblinkingly. That depends on you. The air between them grew tense, the weight of unspoken things pressing down like a storm cloud. Lucas wasn't sure what game she was playing, but he knew this was a test, and for the first time in a long time, he wasn't sure if he was going to pass. Lucas had spent most of his life gambling with fate, but he had never sat across from a queen who looked at him like he was both a nuisance and an enigma in equal measure. The tension between them simmered beneath the surface of the lavish meal, the weight of unspoken intentions pressing down like the humidity before a storm. He was used to reading people, gauging their weaknesses, knowing when to push and when to back off, but with Enya, it was different. She was a puzzle with too many pieces missing, and the longer he sat there, the more he realized he wasn't just trapped physically, he was caught in something far bigger than he had anticipated. She didn't speak for a while, letting the silence stretch between them as if waiting to see if he would break first. Lucas wasn't foolish enough to give her that satisfaction, so he took his time sampling the food set before him, making a show of appearing unbothered. The dishes were exotic, flavors unfamiliar yet rich, some spiced so intensely they burned the back of his throat, others delicate and subtle in ways he didn't expect. The Zans might have been ruthless rulers, but they knew how to eat. Enya finally leaned back in her chair, her fingers idly tracing the rim of her goblet, her red eyes never leaving him. You're more adaptable than I expected, she mused, her voice smooth but carrying a weight that told him she wasn't merely making conversation. Most humans who find themselves in my presence either cower or attempt foolish defiance. You, however, are playing a different game. Lucas shrugged, feigning nonchalance as he carefully considered his response. Cowering has never been my style, and defiance gets you killed when you don't know the rules of the game. I prefer to watch, learn, and wait for my opening. He took another sip of his drink, tilting his head. Speaking of which, I'd really love to know what game we're playing here, Your Majesty. You could have executed me the moment I set foot in your throne room, instead, you keep me close, dress me up, and feed me. He paused. Either you're making me your pet, or you have something else in mind. Her lips curled in a slow, knowing smile, though there was something dangerous in her expression, a warning. A pet, she echoed, amusement flickering in her gaze. No, Lucas. I do not waste my time on mere distractions. You are not a pet, you are a tool. Whether you prove to be useful or not remains to be seen. Her words sent a ripple of unease through him, but he didn't let it show. A tool meant she had a purpose for him, something more than mere entertainment. But the question remained, what did she want from him? He set his goblet down and leaned forward slightly. I appreciate the honesty, but that still doesn't answer the question. Why am I here? What exactly do you think I can do for you? Enya's gaze sharpened as she set her fingers still against the metal of her goblet. For a moment, it seemed she wasn't going to answer. Then she exhaled softly, almost as if she had made a decision. You stole my crown, she said in a deceptively calm voice. You infiltrated the most secure vault in the Empire, evaded my best guards, and would have escaped, if you hadn't been arrogant enough to hesitate. Do you have any idea how few beings in this galaxy could do that? Lucas frowned slightly. He had expected her to be angry, to remind him that she could end him with a mere command, but there was no fury in her voice, just calculated intrigue. You're a thief, she continued, a skilled one. That means you understand things most warriors and politicians do not, how to move unseen, how to manipulate the right people, and how to take what others cannot. Her eyes darkened slightly, something unreadable flashing in them. Right now, I have use for someone with those particular talents. Lucas arched a brow, crossing his arms over his chest. You're telling me the Queen of Xia needs a thief? She smiled, though it wasn't a warm smile. I am telling you that the Queen of Xia needs someone who does not play by the same rules as the rest of the Empire. His mind raced. If Enya needed someone like him, it meant there was something she couldn't do herself, something that required a level of subtlety, deception, or risk that her own people wouldn't dare attempt. And that was interesting. He studied her carefully, his instincts warning him that whatever she was about to ask would be dangerous, but at the same time, he couldn't deny the pull of curiosity. He had always lived for the thrill, for the challenge of impossible jobs, and this felt like something big. He let out a slow breath and leaned back slightly. All right, I'll bite. What's the job? For the first time since their encounter began, Enya's expression hardened, the playful amusement faded into something colder, more calculated. There is a traitor within my court, she said, her voice like steel wrapped in silk, a traitor, someone who seeks to undermine my rule. I have suspicions, but I lack the proof I need to strike first. Lucas exhaled slowly. Politics, huh? I should have known. Let me guess, he muttered, you can't go after them directly because if you make the wrong move, it'll cause an all-out power struggle. She gave him a slow nod. Exactly. Lucas ran a hand down his face, suppressing a groan. He had spent his entire life avoiding this kind of mess, power plays, court intrigue, the delicate dance of who owed whom what. His job was simple, steal something, get paid, disappear. But this wasn't just theft, this was a war before the battle had even begun. And yet, the challenge was intoxicating. He met her gaze again, a smirk returning despite himself. So let me get this straight, you want me to find out who's betraying you, steal the proof, and hand it over so you can clean house without causing a political disaster. She didn't blink. Precisely. Lucas huffed out a quiet laugh. You do realize this means putting a human thief in the middle of an alien power struggle? She tilted her head slightly, considering. You've already proven you are capable of slipping into places you should not be, she said smoothly. And you have one advantage that no one else in my court has. He raised a brow. Oh yeah? What's that? A slow smile spread across her lips, entirely devoid of kindness. They already underestimate you. Lucas hated how much sense that made. He exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck, weighing his options. He could refuse, demand to be released, or try to find another way out of this mess, but deep down he knew Enya wasn't giving him a choice, not really. He was in this now, whether he liked it or not, and the worst part was that he wanted to see how this would play out. Fine, he said, smirking despite himself. I'll do it. But let's get one thing straight, I'm not one of your loyal subjects, Your Majesty. I'm just a man who likes getting paid. Enya's eyes gleamed. Then I suggest you do not fail, Lucas Darnell, because in this game, failure means death. She grinned, and Lucas felt the familiar rush of adrenaline. It wouldn't be the first time he had survived plenty of high-stakes jobs, but nothing quite like this. He wasn't just stealing something valuable or slipping past a security system, he was infiltrating the inner circle of an alien empire, digging through the cracks of a throne held together by power, blood, and the kind of political tension that could collapse a dynasty if pushed the wrong way. He wasn't a fool, he knew what this meant. If Enya had reached the point where she was trusting a human thief to do her dirty work, it meant she was already at war, a quiet one, fought with secrets instead of weapons. And she had chosen him to be her blade in the dark. There was no turning back now. Overnight, the palace had changed. He could feel it, the air was heavier, the guards more alert, their eyes tracking movements they wouldn't have paid attention to before. Enya's court had always been a nest of power plays and veiled threats, but now it felt alive with paranoia, as if the very walls knew something dangerous was creeping beneath their surface. And Lucas, he was the unseen threat they didn't even know to fear yet. Enya wasted no time. The morning after their conversation, Lucas found himself being dressed again, not in shackles or ceremonial chains, but in clothing meant for the palace elite, an outfit that made him look less like a prisoner and more like a foreign dignitary, a deliberate choice. She wasn't just making use of him, she was placing him in plain sight, letting her enemies see him and wonder why he was still alive, what purpose he served. The move was risky, but then again, Enya wasn't the type to play it safe. His new escort arrived before he could process it further, a tall, sharp-sawn male with deep indigo skin and a cold expression, dressed in a uniform that screamed military discipline. He didn't introduce himself or offer even the courtesy of a greeting, he merely turned on his heel, expecting Lucas to follow. Lucas sighed, rolling his shoulders. Not much for small talk, huh? The warrior didn't respond. Great, Lucas muttered, trailing after him. This is going to be fun. They walked through the palace corridors. The path led somewhere deeper away from the main halls and into an area Lucas hadn't seen before. The architecture remained imposing, but there was a noticeable shift, less ornamental, more practical. This wasn't a place for politics and spectacle, this was a place for work. The warrior led him into a large chamber filled with dim blue lighting and an array of holographic projections hovering above circular consoles. Several Zons stood at attention, their expressions guarded, their gazes shifting toward Lucas the second he entered. He recognized power when he saw it, these weren't mere advisors or attendants, they were Enya's strategists, informants, and spymasters, the ones who kept the empire from falling apart while its enemies whispered in the shadows. And they didn't like him being there. Enya stood at the head of the room, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Lucas, meet your new associates, she said smoothly. They will be assisting you in your investigation. Lucas arched a brow, glancing at the gathered officials. Funny, I don't think they got the memo, he remarked. One of them, a tall Zon male with dark copper skin and piercing silver eyes, stepped forward. With all due respect, Your Majesty, this is a mistake. His voice was calm but laced with barely concealed disdain. We have spent years cultivating our intelligence networks. Allowing an outsider, let alone a human, to interfere with such delicate matters is precisely why he will be effective. Enya cut in, her tone unwavering, you have spent years in this palace. You know the politics, the patterns, the expected threats. She gestured toward Lucas, but he does not. And that makes him an unpredictable variable, one that our enemies will not anticipate. Lucas smirked. Nice to know you think so highly of me, Your Majesty. Enya shot him a warning look, but there was something else in her gaze, a silent challenge. She was placing all of this on him now, testing him in front of her own people, forcing him to prove himself or fail spectacularly. The strategist exhaled sharply, but didn't argue further. Instead, he turned back to the table and activated a holographic display that flickered to life above the surface. Lucas immediately recognized a layout of the palace, but as the image zoomed in, he saw something far more interesting, an overlay of movements, highlighted figures, and pathways traced with fine, glowing lines. Enya's voice was measured as she spoke. We have been monitoring unusual activity within my court for the past month, restricted files accessed, silent shifts in guard rotations that do not match protocol, private meetings held in areas far from the eyes of my security. We do not have names, only patterns. She gestured to the highlighted figures. There are at least 3 individuals working against me. Your job is to find out who they are, what they want, and how they plan to strike. Lucas studied the display, absorbing the information. He wasn't a soldier or a trained operative, but he knew how to spot weaknesses. Right now, that was exactly what he was looking at, a web of deception, a game of misdirection. He exhaled slowly. "You're giving me a lot of faith for someone who technically tried to rob you," he remarked. Enya met his gaze steadily. "I'm giving you an opportunity to prove your worth. If you succeed, you will have earned your place." Lucas smirked. "And if I fail?" A slight curl appeared at the corner of her lips. "Then you will not live long enough to regret it." A beat of dead silence followed. Lucas let out a dry chuckle, shaking his head. "You really have a way with motivation, Your Majesty." Enya did not respond verbally, but the challenge was set, the stakes already hanging over his head like a blade waiting to drop. Lucas had been in dangerous situations before, but this was something else entirely. He turned back to the holographic map, scanning the layout with his mind already shifting into problem-solving mode. He needed to approach this like a heist, like breaking into a vault with layers of security that weren't just physical, but political. He needed to get close to the right people, make them trust him, manipulate their expectations, and play them against each other. It was going to be risky, it was going to be dangerous, but for the first time in a long time, Lucas felt alive. He grinned, rolling his shoulders as he looked at Enya. "All right, Your Magic May," he began. "Let's find your traitors," Enya interrupted. Lucas knew how to play people, it was a skill he had sharpened over the years, a skill that had kept him alive in places where a man like him had no business surviving. He had cheated crime lords, bluffed his way past bounty hunters, and swindled merchants across half the galaxy, all because he understood one simple truth: everyone had a weakness. And now, standing in the heart of a royal court teeming with secrets and betrayal, that truth had never been more valuable. The problem was, he was walking blind. Enya's court was filled with powerful figures, each of them too clever, too ruthless to fall for the usual tricks. These weren't street thugs or desperate gamblers, they were politicians, war strategists, and high-ranking nobles, all playing their own version of a game he had only just been dropped into. If he made one wrong move, if he tipped his hand too early, he wouldn't just lose the job, he'd lose his head, which meant he needed information. That was why, hours after the meeting, Lucas found himself moving through the palace corridors, guided by the sharp Zon warrior assigned to shadow his every step. The man still hadn't told him his name, still moved with that stiff military discipline, as if he'd rather throw Lucas off the nearest balcony than escort him around like an honored guest. Lucas sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Do you ever talk, or is silent judgment part of the uniform?" The warrior barely spared him a glance. "I speak when necessary," Lucas smirked. "Right? And I'm guessing right now doesn't qualify?" No answer came. Lucas exhaled through his nose, shaking his head. "Got to say, for people who thrive on intrigue, Zons aren't exactly conversational." Still nothing. Lucas wasn't surprised, he had noticed the way the palace guards looked at him, the way most of Enya's court treated him like an anomaly. The queen had already made a controversial move by keeping him alive, and now she had thrown him straight into the deadliest part of her empire, her own inner circle. Half of these people probably thought he was a mistake waiting to happen, and the other half were watching, waiting to see if he would be useful or disposable. The warrior finally stopped in front of a set of ornate doors, glancing at Lucas before pressing his palm against a glowing panel. "The Queen has granted you access to the court archives," he said in a clipped, professional tone. "Do not overstep." Lucas arched a brow. "Define overstep." The warrior's eyes darkened slightly. "Understand this, human, you are tolerated because the Queen allows it. Step too far, and that privilege will be revoked." Lucas grinned and stepped past him. The doors slid open, revealing a vast chamber lined with towering holographic displays, their shifting glyphs casting a soft, golden glow against the dark metal walls. The archives weren't just records, they were the kingdom's past and present, a collection of everything from military strategies to the whispered rumors of court politics. And right now, he needed those whispers. He walked deeper into the room, his fingers tracing the air as the displays flickered and shifted at his touch, names, dates, locations. There was too much information, too much to sift through without context. "Show me the most recent shifts in guard rotations," he murmured.